So we're getting geared up to hear the student story ideas. So today we had the assignment for 2 original ideas that you can report on. Remember, 1 profile, 1 event idea, with the understanding that going forward you'll choose one of those ideas and start reporting on it as soon as you can. And so there's likely to be a lot more people here next class. Fingers crossed, I hope. Would anyone like to share their ideas now so that it leaves time for everybody else?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Both of them?
Do you think it will be easier to hear him if he's? Yeah? Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Jody.
All right. For my event, there's the Audio Engineering Society is putting together a studio crawl next Friday. And so since Dana is part of the AES and helped put together, so I'm going to be able to interview her about why they're putting it on and stuff, and then she's going to put me in contact with people at the studios so I can interview them as well and get more information from the perspective of the people putting it on, behind the scenes, and then the people that are having their studios looked at. And it's a pretty cool event because studios don't really they're closed doors usually, so you can't really get in. So it's a networking thing for people in audio, and yeah, just a cool opportunity because studios are getting shut down.
Okay.
So that's the event.
I'm sorry to hear that they're getting shut down, but I think it's a fantastic event. When I saw it come up, I thought, ooh, somebody can do a good one on this.
Yeah. So that was struggling to find an event. That was just, and then she was talking about it in class. I was oh, this is perfect.
Perfect. 650 gets you in the door of
exactly.
10 studios and talking to whoever you want.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool. And then I kind of have 2 ideas for the profile, but I just put 1 in there. There's a clothing brand in the Mission called Phase Apparel. I feel I've had a relationship with in the past, and so I just do a profile on the person who started it, and just kind of how they grew and how they're involved with the community and stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Those both sound great. Which one are you leaning more towards?
I think I'm gonna do the studio crawl one, the event.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because I feel I can get more content from that than the other one.
Yeah, I agree. You could get a lot of background from Dana, and you're likely to have people, studio engineers or owners who will talk to you about all kinds of stuff. Yeah. You could get a ton of good stuff. Anybody got comments for Jonah, ideas? Sounds pretty.
Huh?
Kind of clothing.
It's streetwear.
Oh.
More, yeah.
So that would probably make a good profile. I mean, and again, you can stick. The idea is that you could stick with the subject you've got now to the end if you want, or you can change at some point if you like to. So, but either way, it'd be great. So both of those are viable. Fantastic. Yeah. Anybody else? You don't need to go. It's all voluntary.
Did you talk about both of them?
Yeah, I'd prefer to hear about both, but as you saw with what Jonah did, is getting a general idea. Do you want to go, Chow?
I'm not good at summarizing, just me.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah. So Chow's trying to read hers off.
So for my event,
I see the camera swiveling to see. So it's cool. Go for it.
so my event that I'm interested in is a poetry reading event featuring M.K. Chavez, the author of both books, Metamorphosis and Dear Animal. She is also a poet whose 2 poems, The New White House and Finding Myself Among the Ruins, were chosen for the Cosmonauts Avenue 2017 Poetry Award. M.K. Chavez poetry reading will be held in the City College of San Francisco Mission campus in rooms 107, 108 from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Wednesday, September 19, 2018.
Okay, try to speak up for everybody here. The microphone folks can hear you great, but I don't know if everyone else here. So the event would be a poetry reading at the Mission campus. That's great. And your profile?
For my profile, I will be interviewing my best friend, Kendra Alberton, hopefully by Friday, September 21, 2018 at 12:30 p.m. to 1 p.m. or maybe earlier, hopefully. About her creative and artistic talent, specifically on how she creates her own skateboard art and what has inspired her. I'm going to write about her because she is my closest friend that I know that she's willing to use her spare time for this interview. She's newsworthy or interesting because she can do all kinds of art, not just skateboard art, and is a great, genuine friend. I believe the audience would love to learn and hear more about soon.
All right, thank you. Okay, and so which one are you leaning towards more?
My profile came on computer.
Yeah, okay. Actually, you should probably still have this on this. So any questions or comments for Chow? Do you folks know anybody else who like paints skateboards or who is really interested in that kind of thing? Okay. All right. We're wondering if there's like a sort of a trend developing on this. Anyway, we'll let Chow do the research, but I'm pretty sure you're going to find that there's an interested group in like kind of custom painted skateboards and stuff. I think we'll find it. Okay, is that everybody? I didn't see you guys jumping out of your seats to share.
I'll share my event.
Do you want to? Yeah, sure. Hang on, Eric. Let's have this.
So for my event, I want to cover Bernal Heights Outdoor Cinema. It's an annual film festival, and it's being held. Well, it's held every September. It's like a month-long process where they showcase assortment of short films by local producers.
Local producers. Oh, cool.
And well, it's a mix, local and from the park. But so on October 2nd, they have the final night of the annual festival, and so they show all the winners from this year. And so besides the screenings, they also have Q&A with the filmmakers, and they also have a reception at the end. They have live music performance, so it's kind of like a party at the end of the film festival.
Oh.
So I want to cover that.
Yeah, it sounds great. Do you have an angle on it, like who you're, what you're most likely to look at, like?
No angle like that. I didn't take it that far.
Okay. 'Cause it'll probably help when you go, just to have in mind, well, maybe it doesn't have to be just one angle, but like one thing you could talk to people organizing it and say, as kind of typically, what does it bring to the community, and then talk to people who are just like audience as to, what their view of it is. Or on the other hand, you could, talk to someone like, local creators, got their work in there, and so what does it mean to be showcased here? Maybe they're, even from the neighborhood or something, or if not, just finding out like, what's the value to having your work seen like that. And I'm pretty sure, there's interesting stuff could come from that, in part, it's just promotion. It's just being able to be in touch with the audience when they're actually seeing it, instead of like putting a YouTube video out and never really getting to talk to a real person.
I guess I kind of have that idea, but more generally. And so I'd want to talk to filmmakers there and be able to interview them and get their take on whatever they submitted. And if they won, I'll talk about what it took to win. So.
Cool, that's great. And even in an event like that, of course you talk to whoever you can and such, but typically in what we're going to write, you only have the time to sort of feature one voice out of the producers community, because it's really short and stuff. So that's good to have. What we were just doing with Eric is kind of like an event is going to, it actually encompasses a whole bunch of different, people and there are many angles you can take on it. So I'm glad you were thinking, sort of that angle, and that sounds like a really viable one. And you always are. If you go there and you realize, oh, the angle I was thinking of, it doesn't fit at all, this is actually really cool from a different angle, you can always switch, but it always helps for getting organized just to have an angle before, So I think you got it. You know? And I think there are others possible, given that, you know, it's a public event, it involves creative people, it brings the community together, it happens over several nights. This is the culminating night, prizes are given out, you know, so it's many things. Organizational, community, creative, a lot of things. Great. Good potential. Yeah, for sure. Fran, we were just sharing ideas, or is it Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just sharing story ideas. It's like the official day is on Thursday, but there's maybe going to be a lot of people. Would you like to tell us like one or both of your ideas today, so that it's already?
I sort of have one, but yeah, I can.
Could I? Yeah. Here, let me give you the mic. I love hearing these story ideas. I'm always excited to hear what you want to report on it. Sure.
So the idea that I have, I don't know if it's going to work out, but I wanted to interview. I found out my neighbor teaches inmates at San Quentin reading skills, basic reading skills, and so I thought that would be. I mean, as soon as we were talking, we were on the way home on the bus, and we were just sort of chit-chatting, and we were talking about, you know, why we were both late. And, oh, I'm a student, and I'm coming off of work. Oh, where do you work? Oh, I teach inmates at San Quentin how to read, basic skills and that sort of thing. And I'm just, whoa, you know, that's a great idea. I don't know if she's game for it, though. That's the only thing. And the only time I see her, it's like 10:30 in the evening, and then we just kind of wander on home. So I'm crossing my fingers. I'm going to drop a note in her mailbox and see if she'll be willing to do an interview. Not quite sure what perspective or angle to come from, but I'm mulling about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds terrific, and it's a great. It's a testimony to where ideas come from, right? I mean, Chow, I think, was asking early on. It's like, oh, so where do we get inspiration? And it's like riding the bus with a neighbor and talking to them, and it turns out they're doing something fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I was totally fascinated with it. And I wanted to ask her more, but we were at home, so I had to go and she had to go, and I haven't seen her since that day. So, yeah, but you never know. You never know where these ideas are going to come from. Just out of a simple conversation.
Right. And, you know, again, like I used to be at the Starbucks next to KQED a lot, and there's 3-4 people who'd come out of KQED, and they would just chat everybody up in Starbucks. And there's a couple you could pretty much tell that they're just like trolling around for ideas or for what's new around here. So it was really interesting to see them work like reporters. But that's excellent topic. And I don't, you won't really know too much about what angles are potential until you actually talk to her. But, it could be just simply, why do you do what you do? What do you feel you're getting out of it? What do they get out of it? Or it might be, is there something happening to this program, etc. Thank you. We had a story. Carol Summers, whose work I put up as an example, her sister-in-law taught poetry writing at San Quentin, and it turned out to be an interesting story, a really interesting story. I felt she kind of got, she got away from the San Quentin part of it and into a lot of other stuff, and I think she could have just stayed at the San Quentin, the writing aspect of it. Yeah. My old teacher, Stuart Hyde at San Francisco State University, he also was working there too, doing things like that. And he used to say, actually that was interesting, he used to say, because he was retired, and he said, I need these guys way more than they need me, because it's like, this is my satisfaction now, is to go and to talk to them and find out about their experience of writing and stuff. And if I couldn't do that, because he was retired for like 20 years and his wife had passed away, so if I couldn't do that, I wouldn't have that much to look forward to. I wouldn't have this to look forward to. So he was saying teachers need students, So he was really grateful to them for that. So it could be interesting just to hear her ankle on it. Yeah. So that's great. I really hope she says yes. Yeah, I know.
I do too.
It's reminding me of the discussion of Bob Woodward's book, Fear, that comes out. I've heard him in a couple of interviews. And he says he always is talking about the interview he did like at 11:30 at night at somebody's house or something, because he's like basically he's not getting through to them, so he just like goes on a night, he just goes near their house, and then he calls them up and says, "I'm near your place. Can I come? We'll we talk now." I said, "What, now?" He said, "Yeah, now." And so he goes over and they do the interview like until 4 o'clock in the morning or something. So that's funny. Cutting through people's resistance. Ron, would you like to talk about one or both of your story ideas? It's not required today, but just because there's probably going to be a lot more people next class, we were kind of going today. Would you like to talk about it? You don't have to if you don't want to.
Nah. Or it's like I don't really have anything right now because I still haven't really gotten into my RAM ID. But I was thinking about interviewing this band.
A band? Oh, okay.
Just recently released an album.
This is the unofficial. They just released an album. That's cool.
Yeah, they're called Louder, and I met the lead singer this summer.
Okay.
So for me to make this happen, I would have to, shoot a text to them through Instagram and see if they actually come through or not. Because
Okay.
they're currently touring too.
Okay.
And I'm not sure when they're coming back here.
Okay. Well, things can be done, remotely. Like it's possible just to phone them up to do an interview if that turns out to be what you want to settle on.
Okay.
So, they don't actually have to be in town, but they have to be willing and reliable enough, because otherwise, usually the only difficulty with any of these stories is we think that they're going to cooperate and then they don't,
Right.
Like you get some vague, okay, we'll do it, and then when it comes to the crunch, they never call you back or something like that. So that's, now is the time to figure it out. If you want to do it, if you're committed to it, then try to make contact with them and see if they'll, do it. And sometimes people will just, what's it? It's like 20 minutes out of their life just to call you on the phone or something. And so maybe, I don't know. So try to decide, between now and the next couple of days if that's something you want to do. But it sounds like it'd be a good profile, Yeah. We move on, and then maybe Thursday we'll hear from anybody else who wants to do it. Okay, cool. So, just looking at the assignment, right? Where is it? There it is. Doesn't give a whole lot of detail. It just says provide a list of up to 10 questions you will ask in your interview. Take care to organize your questions, typo there, thank you, so that any controversial or confrontational issues are brought up towards the end of the interview. And then provide a list of at least 5 items of information that you should research or know before you go into the interview. State the topic and possible sources for your information. Okay, so that's what's coming up once you, for next week, September 25th. But go right ahead if you can meet them tomorrow and conduct an interview. That's okay. Don't put it off just to keep on with the schedule of assignments or something. So I should clarify, and I will again on Thursday. So this interview is primarily informational. In other words, you're interviewing people to ask questions just to get information, answers, right, to your questions. So we call that informational. And a secondary thing that you're doing, which is really important, which is you're getting actualities. Or remember, that was the fancy word for sound bites that you can write into a script, okay? So the reason I need to clarify this is some students will go, do the interview, record it on their phone or whatever, transcribe. It comes out to like 6 pages long of every word that was said, and then they'll turn that in. which is not what the assignment is. I will never ask you to turn in the full transcript of your interview. That's not why we're doing the interview. You're doing the interview to get information, just like you were a reporter, writing a story in the Guardsman, wherever. So you're trying to get information, and then you are going to write a story that you can, primarily you will be narrating it on the air. And every once in a while, you'll insert an actuality, a soundbite from your interview. Just like in, an article from the Guardsman, it's all written by the reporter. The reporter was there to gather information. So it's all written by the reporter in the reporter's voice, and every once in a while there's a quote. So there's a quote. So for radio, again, you do the interview to get information, and then you write up the script, which would be you saying 90% of it. But every once in a while you get an actuality, a soundbite, which is the person that you interviewed. If we were hearing it on the air, you would play that little soundbite at that time. So those are actualities. And but most of this is driven by you and the script you write based on the information that you get out of the interview that you got to conduct pretty soon so that you'll be able to write this, because I think October 2nd is we're actually expecting to have a script based on what you've done in your interview. So if that doesn't quite fit your timeline, if it's an event that happens on October 9th or something, you want to focus your story at this point on, the organization of the event or something like that, or the background of it. Like for instance, Jonah, I know your event's coming up on time and that's fine, but even if it was like not on time, if it was later, you could still talk to Dana about, what the benefits of all this are for students, why the studios are doing it, what's the current state of the business, so that it's interesting. There's so much you could talk about, and you could call somebody organizing and say, well, how do you put something together like this? And so even if the event isn't perfectly adjusted to our timeline, you can always, do something on the organization, or if it already happened like a month ago, you can just write as though it just happened a few days ago. That's okay too. That's all right. So that's the purpose of the interview: gather information, secondary actualities, right? So you should count on recording the interview so that you have, an accurate record of what was said. A lot of old school reporters know shorthand, and they stand there with their notebook and they just take notes as it goes on, and some of them are really accurate, obviously. But I don't have that skill. You probably don't either. So just record on the phone, and that way you'll have a record for when you come back. So we're not actually going to produce any of this for radio, but you'll have everything that was said for your to write into your script, whatever is necessary. Now the other thing here is the second part of this. It says provide at least 5 items of information. I just want to, that's kind of like, okay, is it 4? Is it 6? I don't know. Think of what kind of information that you need. So as I said, your interview is informational, but there's stuff that happens prior to your interview. Things that you should know before you go into your interview. For a couple of reasons. One is for your own credibility. So when someone talks to you, when someone agrees to an interview, they do expect you to know enough about what they're doing so that they can, get to the heart of the topic without having to explain it all to you, There's a lot of dynamics around that. That's all that I can say. If you can come into an interview with somebody where they feel like you know what they're talking about, they'll be more likely to tell you interesting stuff because they know you're interested, right? It's like having a conversation at a party. If you run into somebody who, they like something that you have no interest in, it's probably not going to work, But if you're both passionate about the same thing, then you're going to go a lot further. So the pre-research, getting the information before you do the interview is important, just to have a good rapport it's important for your credibility. So it's like, you know, certain people who are close to me, I could well imagine them waking up and say, yeah, my teacher told me I have to ask you some questions. You know, and then it's kind of like it's all, none of it's about them. None of it is invested with their own passion. It's all about, I just had to do this, and you are, you know, that's not going to work out too well, right? So it's like, in terms of credibility, in terms of making the interview work, you should know stuff in advance. So just think through, where could you find out more about this? You know, I was suggesting to Chow that prior to talking to her friend, who she's profiling as an artist who custom decorates skateboards and stuff, that Chow could check out, you know, websites, YouTube videos, stuff like that, which might lead her to a better grasp of, you know, is there a bunch of people doing this? Is this, you know, kind of a trend? I mean, are there magazines or any other media which, you know, pay attention to this type of thing, in addition to, you know, people on their blogs or on their YouTubes or Instagram or whatever who are posting stuff they do, or Pinterest, or people on Etsy selling, you know, boards or something like that. It's quite possible they sell just about anything. And so that would be interesting background information, which would, you know, put Chow's friend in context. Like, why is she doing this? Well, a bunch of people are doing this. In fact, it's more of a thing than we might have known about. So those are good things for background information. So just give me a list of those as you can think of it. And again, start doing this right away, because, you know, it's hopefully you'll be using these questions and going into an interview in the next week or so. Questions about that?
Is this just turning in the questions and the research?
Yeah, that's what this one is for September 25th. A list of maximum 10 questions, and, you know, just the research topics and stuff. So you got your questions ready to ask, and then you'll also have done a little bit of research in preparation for going to talk to somebody.
Okay.
Makes sense?
And how many seconds should you sound?
How many what?
How many seconds?
You know, we typically say about 15 seconds maximum for a soundbite, which might turn into 2 or 3 sentences.
Should we get the research from them, or should we research?
You can always ask them, but as I said, you should do the research before you actually talk to them, so you appear as informed as possible.
Okay.
And then when you go in, if they mention anything, like a great set of follow-up questions at the end is just like, well, is there anything more? Or if there was something that while you were going through that seemed really interesting, you know, where could I find out more about that? Or, you know, typically, who could I talk to? Which, you know, we're not going to take that, but that's the snowballing way of generating, you know, more material.
Could you possibly like talk to other people that know them?
Sure, if you want, yeah. If you have access, you know, it's already tough to get access to one person, but typically a profile, you know, the New Yorker style is you talk to like everybody who knows them. And, you know, so if you can, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are good additional sources of info. So we have a chapter assigned for this week, which is all about interviewing, what the textbook can tell us. So now remembering that for broadcast, we have, you know, that little extra thing that we've got to do, which is think about what sound bites, what actualities we're actually getting out of an interview, right? A reporter writing for the Guardsman is free to edit and synthesize quotes, like stick them together, so that, you know, if you have one of those people who never stops talking, which they're usually professors, so if you have one of them that you're interviewing, you know, it's easy to cut down a quote for print. It's much harder to cut down an actuality in broadcasting. So, you know, we do have to think, that's an extra little constraint that we have. But don't worry about it for now. You know, write your questions, get your information going, talk to the people, and then next week we'll start talking about, you know, what to do when you come back with an interview and how to kind of sort through it for all the stuff that you need.
Don't turn in the recording until.
You don't turn in the recording? Nope. And you don't transcribe it all either. So don't go home and write out your full 20 pages. That's not the way it works. Usually you lay out your story in kind of a point form, and then you run through your tape once or twice, I don't know, but it doesn't take as long as it would to type the whole damn thing out. You just listen to it, run through it, and you're looking at the points that you want to have in your story, and you're listening and say, oh, okay, that would be a good little actuality to put there. And then you stop and you transcribe exactly what you need, okay? There are some organizations which used to be able to pay for someone to actually sit through the entire thing and type it all out. And documentaries are still made that way because sometimes you spend 5 years making a documentary, you know. But for this type of newsy stuff, they stay on the tape. In fact, it's all digital, right? And it's an integrated program of a word processor and like a Pro Tools type of, a playback engine. And you just go through it. You put markers wherever you think you'll need them to take a sound bite. And at the end of the day, you're typing at the same time, kind of outlining and then filling in. And then at that point, you just type in, okay, the 2-3 sentences you need. That's the way it's done. So don't write out your entire interview. Okay. All right, so yeah, learning objectives. This kind of covers, in a general sense, interviewing for all media. So preparation. You should understand both the purpose of your interview and why this source matters to your project. So that's kind of what I was looking at with Eric, first of all, which is like, what's your angle? You know, Eric's angle is going to be, hopefully, if he gets access, is going to be, you know, a creative person whose work has been featured in this festival. So now his understanding, you know, that's a key thing to figure out. I got this event, but my angle is, you know, creators and what does it do for them? So then understanding this, well, that interview is going to become sort of the heart of this report on what's going on. You know, so this source truly does matter because you're going to tell the story of the festival from the point of view of someone whose work is featured there, which is a pretty privileged and interesting perspective. You know, most people go and attend, but they don't actually have any work in a public venue like that. And having done a couple of things like that, and also having like been a fly on the wall at a lot of festivals, it's a very important moment for any creator, especially at the beginning of their career, to have to see their work with a big audience is a big deal. So I think it has a lot of potential, that angle. So places to dig, as we said, this is preparation, right? So again, this is very generally, but people working in print have the files of their own publication. Or you could, you know, Google out information, especially if your person has a public profile. You know, in other words, they're known to more people than just you and your friends, but to the community at large. Someone probably wrote about them. Or if it's an event, they'll have press releases, all kinds of stuff like that. So if you can get a hold of any of that before you actually talk to someone, you're cutting through a lot of basically BS, you know, where if they're just going to tell you the top 10 lines of their press release, you might as well read it in advance and just cut right through to the questions you want answered. You know? So it's easy to find both the PR material and the actual journalism online now. But just remember, if you're dipping into the PR material, it's constructed with a certain point of view. You know? Company websites, and so again, if you're dealing with, like, you know, Jonah's working on the AES event, they have a website, so they have a website for the crawl, they have a website for, you know, the local chapter, they probably have a national website, so there's plenty of information there, you know, and you can find out about the people who might come up in the story through the bios and stuff. Trades, so you know, there's different publications. The last thing I looked at was San Francisco real estate trade. So a lot of those are actually in databases that, you know, trades are sometimes online in Google. Sometimes they're locked behind a paywall. You can find them sometimes in databases. Again, I haven't heard any stories today which would send you looking in the trades. But if you do have a story like that, a good place to start is at your local library. So call the reference desk and say, I'm interested in the average price of housing in San Francisco, and can you direct me to resources? And that's their job. They'll do it, and they'll tell you, oh yeah, well, we have this publication, and this one here at the library or available online. So looking in trade press is good. Again, if onto Jonah's topic, some context might be found in some of those many, sound magazines that we get out there or whatever. I'm not sure, but if you wanted, if you wanted to corroborate something that's being said about, you said studios are closing, right? Well, you'll have people telling you that. You might also have articles in trades which say, general decline or some sad thing like that. So you can find it for sure. Social media, look here for information about the person's passions, interests, and goals. Yeah, that's, people do it. LinkedIn as well, for their profile to find out, some of their work background maybe. Again, won't you appear informed if you're talking to someone and you looked at their profile and like a couple of jobs before, would the fact that you worked for the Attorney General's office have anything to do with your interest in this aspect or that? It's a great question. You'll get like a very enthusiastic answer, hopefully, unless you're poking some sore spots. It's possible. Other sources. Here you go. So that was your question. Should we talk to other people who know your source? Yeah, definitely. If you can get them to talk, great. All right. So any questions about that? So this is kind of the lead up. So Ron, if it does go through with the band, you might look at all their social media feeds and stuff. You'll probably find out a ton of stuff about their latest activities, the shows that they're playing at, or music they've released, stuff like that. So that, again, you can get so much more information before you go into the interview. If you don't do this, a lot of your time will be spent just getting the basic stuff that that you don't really need an interview for because it's already out there. So.
Yeah, I know I'm listening to majority of your stuff on Spotify, and then.
Does that have bios and information as well as the music, or?
No, just songs.
Songs and
like you can look up at the profiles, but just I already got them on Instagram alone too.
Cool.
So.
Cool. Yeah. So the social media route sounds very promising for your particular profile. Yeah, definitely. So Chow, it's going to be interesting to see where you'll find more information about your profile. So
Social media.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. So it can be directly about the person, or it could be, more generally about the activity they're involved in. So, getting the interview and gaining the trust of your source. So in this class, for sure, we very rarely have controversial or sensitive interviews. I remember a couple of years ago, someone wanted to, interview the football team about, use of painkillers and stuff. It was like, that was going nowhere. There's no, anything like that, we don't have the leverage, unfortunately. It would be great if we did, but we don't. So you usually won't find people who want to talk to you about controversial stuff. Last semester, a great student went to, it was kind of like a street fair to promote the opening of a new kind of block of development housing, which was down around 3rd Street or something. And So, you know, it's pretty innocent, right? He was going just to ask questions, and it was a public event, and there were people there from the developers. They wouldn't talk to him because they were so afraid that the actual angle of the story was, you know, gentrification and forcing people out, and they just didn't believe that, you know, that our student was going to be honest with them. But he was, you know, and so that was interesting.
So he was looking for a positive point of view on it.
Literally, it was like an
They
event.
just wouldn't talk to him.
They wouldn't talk to him. In fact, well, I should, you know, it was like they followed up with me and said, you know, what's the student want to know? And I said, look, the student has no agenda whatsoever. So then they said, hello. So then they said, okay, we'll review what we can do for you. And a week later, they sent like the press release by email, and they said, please now ask your student not to follow up anymore. Wow. And that was just because they were so paranoid, you know. They didn't want to be involved in a story that looked bad for them. So it was really disappointing in the first leg of it, but then, you know, it was kind of like they're their own worst enemy. Because after that, the student continued on the story and actually went to a community group and said, so what do you feel about this? So he actually, because of the reaction he'd gotten from the developer, he realized, oh, this is really controversial. I should talk to, you know, the people who are against this. And so he did. So the web story was excellent. It was balanced. It had both sides. But isn't that incredible? It's like, it's hard to imagine.
Whoops.
Yeah, I guess. You know, they kind of... You know, what do they care? It stayed in a class and everything. It was ridiculous, their whole fearful attitude from the start. But it was also, I felt bad for the student who was, you know, he was just not treated well. That's all. But that's the reality of it. Okie doke. So on to, you know, getting the interview, understand your purpose. What's your angle is my shorthand for that. The purpose of the interview will dictate what tone you take with your subject, how much time you will need with your source, what types of questions you will prepare. So when working with your best friend, you want to try to take as much professional distance as you can. In part because your whole audience won't know them as well as you do. And in part because you want to appear, you know, like you're not already sold in advance on everything to do with this person, which typically we are with our best friends. So I know some journalism teachers say, you know, nah, you gotta do this on somebody that you don't know at all. But I don't say that. But it is important for you to take a professional tone. The rest of it kind of depends. Very often you get the amount of time they give you, and the minute you start asking tough questions, the tone usually goes kind of cold and you don't have much more time. That's what I've felt in these. So prepare your questions. Well, I think it'll, let's just see.
With the difficult ones at the end?
Yes, absolutely. Where is it? I don't know these guys.
Well,
Whatever.
But are we gonna be asking difficult questions? I mean,
Most people aren't.
Okay.
But if I was JP and I was going to see the real estate developer, you know, ask the easy questions first, and then if you've got one, well, what about people who might be displaced by this whole project? That's the one you ask
So they can
last.
kick you out, but you're already done.
But you already got it. Yeah, exactly. You know, and you just hope as they kick you out. You know, if they're professional, they'll say, well, you know, they'll find a way of not answering. But they won't say, okay, you can't use anything that I gave you already, because, yeah. So yeah, pace yourself. Ask questions in the beginning which are going to build a little bit of rapport as much as possible, if there is no rapport. So, you know, ask them questions that are not going to kind of challenge them, basically, to start with. And then as you move in, you know, you'll have this. I'm reminded again of a couple of semesters ago of a profile of an author, and the student knew the author because she was friends with her niece, I think. A very I can't remember the name, but it was a sort of big deal San Francisco author who also was just so smart in the interview. It was incredible. But anyhow, asked a question about, you know, something like, I know someone in your family had these troubles. How did it affect you? And it was like instant chill. It was kind of like, oh, so you know about that. That was the first response was, oh, so you know about that. And then after that, there was a very careful kind of
There was no more talking after that.
That was it. I mean, it was kind of informational. It was like she would talk about how it felt to publish her own book, but nothing much about, you know, family history or anything like that. So it was an interesting demonstration of, you know. So pace yourself. Anything that's challenging, you know, save it for later. Okay.
Save it for later.
We're back to foci. So, you know, I think, Chow, we actually talked a little bit about this. What I think is important here is whether or not you remember fame, oddity, conflict, impact, and, what was the last one? Impact and, there was another eye. Immediacy, got it, right? So that means that things that are closer to you are going to matter more to you. What I was saying to Chow and the way I see it is your audience, they don't know your story. As you tell your story, they're going to want to know stuff as you go along. So just try to think of what does your audience want to know. Especially if you do a decent job at the beginning saying, well, this is going to be a story about a community development. Then, you know, your audience is, they know what's going on. They're going to be thinking. So you try to think there along with them. What is it that they want to know? And so, of course, if they drop a name of somebody who's really famous, that's kind of like instantly, you know, oh, you would want to, you know, oh, really? So you know so-and-so or whatever, or that person was a big influence? Well, tell us about that, because it's a name they'll recognize or something like that. So yes, if stuff comes up that is sort of foci, for sure you'd want to follow it. But otherwise, the general thing is just think about what your audience wants to know and, you know, try to ask those questions where they'll get their answers. Proper manners, introduce yourself, explain your purpose. Yeah, so this comes down to just presentation. Where should we meet? So if it works out for you and it doesn't put you in a potentially dangerous situation because you may not know this person or whatever, go to the source's turf if that's what works for them. Otherwise, someplace quiet where you're not going to feel like you're being overheard all the time. So, you know, just where they'd be most comfortable having a conversation. But of course, you don't go off to their house in the middle of the night.
Unless you're Bob Woodward.
Exactly right. I was just telling Fran about that. How many times I've heard about the 11:30 visit to the Washington townhouse.
Like, can we have a conversation right now?
But it's midnight. No, it's cool. It's
Come
cool.
in.
Yeah, exactly. We listen to the same podcasts, I guess. I don't know. Interacting with your source. When you start your interview, be conservative in your tone, professional in your approach. Once you get to know the source, you conduct over time, you can become more laid back. Okay, so be polite. Is there anything to say about that, I guess? Not really. Interviewing for multiple media. So this is where we get into the specifics, you know, of working on a radio or a television show. So what are you guys going to use to record? Probably your phone? Voice memo on your phone? That's what I would suggest. Or Fran has a camera, probably shoots video. You could record on that too.
I think about buying a voice recorder.
Zoom recorder.
Oh, you have a Zoom? That's awesome. Great. Do you have something, Ron?
I think about buying a voice recorder.
Oh, to buy one?
Yeah.
Well, please don't spend money for this class unless you have to. But your phone doesn't record like memos or something?
I mean, it records, but it's only if by chance if I were to do like FaceTime or something like that.
Oh, really? Okay. Is it an iPhone or is it Android?
Android.
Okay, I don't really know apps. iPhone, there's a bunch of apps as well that will, record audio for you. But so voice memo works great, but I started using one called Voice Record, an app, which I was recommending over the summer, and they all found it really good too. So it's a little bit better than the memo, just because it has a meter in it and stuff. So I found it pretty good. And it'll output uncompressed or compressed files. But now we're getting into geekiness, which is, remember, you're just recording a record of the conversation, so it doesn't have to sound great. But as soon as you're professional, of course, it will have to sound good. So at that point, I suggest, BCST 120, your basic audio class, where we'll teach you how to get great audio on voices. It's not that hard, but it's good to have the whole background. Or 141, field video, where we'll let you use pro cameras and get some good experience.
They have field video.
They will. They're alternating it.
Okay.
Yeah, once in the fall, once in the spring, once in the fall. Yeah.
Okay.
I know. I'm sorry. I wish everything. This one is the same. We're in rotation, right? I don't know. Yeah. So that is. We won't go through that in this class because we're just a writing class. So, of course, you always want to let them know that you're recording, and usually before you even, when you're setting it up, just say, "And could I please record it for my notes?" And so let them know what you plan to do with the material. We have release forms for, if this was an audiovisual class where we were actually like editing, and we would say get a release form, where you can, they'll give you permission. It's also possible to get for informational, to get a permission just on the recording. So typically you'd start with, could you just state your name and what your position is? If their name is like, you ask them to spell their name maybe, and just say, we're recording today on, September 18th, and you're good. I mean, if they didn't tell you to turn it off, then it's there, right? I saw something funny in the news or something or is it a book that someone's put out? Something is like, always get the name of the dog. Did you hear anything about that?
No, I didn't hear that.
It was just like, I think it's a kind of an in joke. It's just like, get every detail possible if you're, so they ask the name of the dog as well. But it's just, if you just ask the source for their name, their position, and make it clear that, it's the recorder was not hidden, it's out there,
Well, what's funny is you have, our current situation with our president. I keep bringing this up, I'm sorry. But because Woodward, he asked if he could record a conversation between him and the president.
Yeah.
And the president was like, sure, it's okay.
Yeah.
But then the message that he got out, he totally refuted it. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's a little bit weird because, could all the people who recorded him without letting him know just let him know and then still add those recordings against him?
Okay, let me try to process that question.
Because
Omarosa, she had her cell phone running all the time.
Cohen was recording him without saying it. Could they have just been like, hey, can I record you? And then he said something ridiculous and then it still got out.
I mean, I guess they could, right? But they weren't disclosing
because other people have disclosed it to him.
Yeah.
And he was like, it was all right. And then
Yeah.
it was damaging information.
Yeah, yeah. The weird thing about him, he seems to have like well, now we're really getting into inside, but,
Sorry.
but he seems to have like the attitude is basically, he can refute any fact, anything. He says doesn't matter,
even if it's
Maria was like the unsung success story of FEMA, because his whole game is, if it's an inconvenient reality, I'll pretend it doesn't exist. And that's so much a core of who he is as a public figure that he gets away with it all the time. It's kind of like a constant slap in the face to the truth, is that he just will say anything was great, even if it wasn't, and that's it. And he's the president. No one can stop him. That's what's so weird about it. So I have a feeling it's almost like, yeah, sure, record. And if I say the wrong thing, you know, 2 hours later, yeah, I'll pretend it didn't happen. 2 hours later, I'll say the opposite, and I'll say it louder so that your recording doesn't register with my voters. It's like, wow, it's so totally against what, you know, the adherence to truth, which is the foundation of journalism. And you thought politics, but no, of course not. So let's see. Some pieces of interview will do better as text copy because the information is tight, short, and easy to follow. Other pieces such as anecdotes, explanation, or emotional tales might be more valuable in audio or video format. So that's really a good point. Because when you go through and choose your actualities, you're usually actually playing a little bit of tape with the person talking because, you know, they expose something. There's something about the tone of their voice or the actual words that they said which carry a sense of what their character is, you know. If it's just giving the 5 W's, you can do that better than anybody else, you know, because you can script it nice and tight and direct and kind of fact-checked and airtight. So you should be doing this part in your script as you write the information, and you should be using actualities, you know, for the added value that someone's actual voice can give you. You know, their particular way of saying something, or their emotional outburst, or you know, if of course what they say runs counter to what appears to be the truth, you want to have them verbatim so that it's clear to the reader exactly, you know, how misleading they are, and so on. So those are good reasons to go to actualities. So people who do this a lot, like more than I ever did, they have an ear for an actuality. Like right away, you know, they're recording information at the same time, but they're going to know when they hit something, you know, that's out of the ordinary that they can use. You know, they'll even, you know, there's time code on video recordings. Sometimes they'll even, you know, just jot down the time code or something. You can sync the camera time code to the time of day, and so, you know, even if it's a camera operator who's over there and you're taking something, you can just look at your watch and note it down. So you could go right to the file and get that little thing if you need it. So anyway, that's good stuff. When you're getting, you know, give them time to open up and tell a little bit of a story. That'll be great. But you will probably like squish all the details into some really tight paragraphs and just take a few bites of them, you know. So that's good. So there's a difference between open-ended questions, which you want to ask, and close-ended questions, which are effective under very limited circumstances. So close-ended questions, if you've done your research in advance and you find discrepancies or things that you just want verified as clearly as you can on the record, a close-ended question is great. Did they fire you on the 15th of September saying that you were late? Yes or no? So that's a close-ended question. It gives you a yes or a no answer, or a really straight fact. And usually you want to ask those just to pin people down. But most of the time, you're going to be using open-ended questions, they're just designed to get people talking so that you can find out more. So you get extended answers, which is good because then you can go through and get better actualities out of that. Like closed-ended, you'll usually get 2-3 words. And it's very hard to use that, except, sort of, we asked him, was he fired at 9:30? And then he'd say, and you'll get, yes, or I was fired at 9:30. So sometimes you'll find a closed-ended question results in an actuality, but usually it's all open-ended. So, again, when you want to add color, feel, or emotion to a story. So, I mean, the huge cliche of the lazy TV reporter is, how did it feel when the piano dropped out of the sky on your foot? But how did it feel, right? But you can do better than that.
Make you feel.
Exactly, right? So you can do better than that. You can Terry Gross is fantastic at this. If you listen to the open-ended questions in in fresh air, for instance. They're absolutely on a topic. She economically sketches out the topic as she is, asking the question. But then it's like, open the door for 2 minutes, 3 minutes of answer, whatever they want to run with. So the trick is really to raise the topic, and sometimes it's even like there's been 4 layoffs at your work in the last month. Tell me more, or something like that. Why do you think there have been so many layoffs lately at work? They're all opening the door to multiple questions, or multiple answers.
Question.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, especially if you're dealing with somebody you don't know that well, when you start having conversations with them, just by what they're saying brings up new questions.
Yeah.
So how do you keep from venturing down the rabbit hole of new questions?
Yeah.
And sticking with the 10 questions you already have?
Yeah, well, you need a firm grasp. What's your angle? How do they fit within your story, basically? And that's why it's actually really tough to show up without a clear idea of your angle, and then hopefully find your way. Just because whoever you talk to will have a different perspective, and then it's like, oh, is it this? Is that? That's the idea. Yeah. So you have to kind of know in advance, and then see how do they plug in there. And then you're always like, okay, we can go there a little bit, but let's come back to what I really need. Fran, you had your hand up?
Oh, I was just going to say, I've had that happen, and what I would do is I have a reporter's notebook, and I'll just jot it down really quickly while they're answering the original question, and then I'll just jot down a couple words of the new question, and then finish that, and then maybe come back to that one.
If you have time.
If
Sweet.
you have time.
Okay.
If it's
Nice.
even relevant to
It's a great idea. Do you do shorthand, Fran, or is you just?
my very own.
Okay.
shorthand. Only I can read it.
That's all right.
Well, that's good, because nobody knows it. Nobody can I don't know what this means.
It's called chicken scratch.
Very
They need you to decode your own stuff, but that's a great suggestion. So you kind of toss them in a get to this later, so you keep on with your agenda.
Okay.
That's cool. That's a great idea. So it says here you should come up with 4 or 5 primary questions that will serve as the skeletal structure of your interview. That's good advice. I say in the assignment like up to 10. And these are kind of guideposts that eventually you'll, you may not ask all of them, because in the heat of the moment they may answer them without you asking them, but they're kind of things that you want to get to, and so that's important. I'd say probably 4 or 5 main ones.
Why
Makes a
did
lot
it
of
say
sense.
troll for quotes?
Troll for quotes. So trolling for quotes is like, okay, I know really everything that's going on in this story from an informational perspective. I could write it, but what I need is to hear them actually say some of it. So at that point, trolling for quotes, I think that's what they mean there. Are you asking what you think you're asking? Ask the questions of yourself, have a colleague look through them. If you read your questions out loud, you can see the phrasing has varied meanings. Okay, so that, true. You look over your questions and make sure they're as clear as possible. I don't know if on the next slide or that's coming up, but the rule is to ask one question at a time. And I had a terrible habit of asking 2 or 3, and then they don't know which one to answer, or they just go ahead and answer the last one, or the one that's easiest for them to answer, and then they forget the rest, and you kind of lost your opportunity to get those. So try to just ask one question at a time, which is easy if you've got a list and you're saying da 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 da, but you'll find that you get into it more, and then the temptation is to ask several questions. Interview flow. As you move through your questions, you need to make sure you're paying attention to the source and the answers the source is giving you. So this is a good point. Just again, reading the list of questions doesn't make it a productive interaction. You should also be following up, especially if, now we don't do that in this class, but if you are in kind of a long interview form where you're interviewing to have, 20 minutes, a half hour on the air, it's all about interacting, you know, and following up based on what you're told. It's really important. For the type of short news items with actualities that we do, that's not as important. But on the other hand, they may have left out some key little bit of information, and you may have to like prompt them to get that last little bit. So typically in a radio wrap, you never hear the reporter asking a question. The exception is if they needed a follow-up, you know, and sometimes you'll hear a reporter's quick follow-up and it'll all be part of an actuality. So that's important. Silence, give them a chance to answer and think it over, especially profiles and stuff. So some people might jump in and talk forever, but some people just give them the time to answer. So a slightly unnatural pause before you interject may give them the timing just to fill in the gap, and you'll learn something interesting. The nonverbal thing. So, you know, again, we're just writing scripts here, but nothing worse than doing an interview with material that is to go on the air, and you're going, all the time. So you have to just nod, yeah. And they even call them nodders, like reaction shots for video. So while it's going on, you know, it's okay once in a while, but some people like, it's like really, it's terrible for editing, and so look them in the eye and look really interested, and you know, it's just don't coach them orally. Now, on the other hand, there's an idea that absolute objectivity comes from, you know, total, you ask the question and then you sit there and get their statement, and then you ask another question. But I've been on set with a business reporter for a national news magazine, and video news magazine. They asked a question 10 times at least. They asked the same question over and over, and they said, okay, that was really good. Can we like summarize it a little bit shorter? And, you know, and then it was like, okay, can we, you know, make sure we talk about this, this, and this? And, you know, like take 10, they got what they wanted. And that was regarded as journalism, no problem. So don't, you know, again, you guys are going to be recording what you can get, but in the constraints of broadcasting, they will redo stuff just to get it. Okay, anything else? 3 things to improve. Well, let's get to that next class. So next class is like you know, everyone should be here so we can talk about story ideas and share. And already it's the most exciting time to hear what you're working on. So I'm looking forward to that.